Good afternoon, evening, and very early morning for some of you joining us live from across the globe. I'm Megan Lillick from the Berlin School, and I'd like to wish you all a very happy International Women's Day. Thank you all for being here to participate in today's Power Hour, our co-initiative put on with Rare with Google. Now, before we start, I just wanted to let you know that this webinar will be recorded so you can share it with your friends and colleagues who were unable to make it to the live event. And we'll be sharing that link on the event page there on LinkedIn. So check that out later. And throughout the webinar, we invite you to post questions and comments in the chat and/or Q&A windows. And at the end, we'll capture the most common questions to be answered during the Q&A section. Without further ado, let me introduce to you our co-host and moderator, Tara McGinty, co-founder at Rare with Google and creative director at Google. She's also a participant from class 18 of our executive MBA in creative leadership. So I'll pass the mic on to you, Tara.
Thank you, Megan, and good evening to everyone that's dialed in from all of the different time zones. I'm hoping that my quarantine Wi-Fi and my makeshift mobile Zoom setup is going to get us through the hour, but I have confidence in the New Zealand government. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. For me, that is in Mangere, Aotearoa, New Zealand. That is the Tamaki Iwi. I would also like to acknowledge First Nations people around the world and honour their ongoing traditions as the first artists, the first storytellers and caretakers of the world's oldest living cultures. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this hour of power. As Megan introduced me, my name is Tara. I'm your moderator today. I'm also a creative director for Google here in Asia Pacific. I'm the founder of Rare with Google, Google's diversity, equity and inclusion program that strives to support underrepresented creatives at every stage of their career. And I'm also a Berlin Scholar of Class 18. So big shout out if there's anyone from Class 18 here today. Today we'll be touching on the themes of gender-based power and how these inequities are affecting creative business, wider society and culture, how power balances vary by countries and culture, and the broader imperative for social and economic justice. So to help us get through these themes today, we have a remarkable panel of women that we've assembled, and I just wanted to thank them for giving up their time to join us on this important discussion. They're either all ex-Berliners or friends of the Berlin School or Rare. So welcome Dr. Rosa, Salai, Xenia, Laura and Laura Jordan Bombach. Shortly, each panelist will introduce themselves. But first, more about me on this International Women's Day. That should be every day of the year. But during the first 10 years working in the creative industry, I was in a traditional copy and art creative partnership with a white cisgendered male. On reflection, the straight white man shield protected me from a lot of bias and power imbalance that I often witnessed other individual female creatives and employees enduring. I benefited from his privilege by association. It wasn't until my creative partnership ended 3 years ago that I started to feel my gender. I've found that I have to work harder with my male colleagues for rapport. I've become more conscious of how much I speak in meetings. And if I'm working regionally in markets like Japan, I will often assign my male reports to present on my behalf to give the work the best chance. Working in these conditions suck. It's infuriating, and it sucks that our industry often responds in inequality by offering underrepresented talent with upskilling programs for us to become better. Women and marginalized talent are already good. In fact, we are great. The difference of perspective that our diverse minds offer this industry is what will keep it alive. Without diversity, there isn't imagination, and without imagination, there wouldn't be innovation. And in the creative industries, we are in the business of both. This imbalance of power is not actually a women's problem. It is the 85% of creative leaders, our male man shields, that need to solve this. Allyship is our fastest strategy to equality and chance to change the state of the industry. David R. Heckman from the University of Colorado expresses in his research that when male executives do step up into allyship, they're not rewarded. And that when marginalized talent and leadership advocate for diversity, they're in fact penalized. So what is the solution? How do we convert male man shields into advocates to fight the good fight? and ensure that women like our panelists know that the work that they have done to change conditions at their own expense at times is greatly appreciated. So, panelists, welcome. You are appreciated. And now we would like to use your brilliant minds for the next 90 minutes for their wisdom and insights to explore these themes and find solutions to changing the state of the industry. I would like to now pass it over to each of you to share an initial thought, experience, or example of a power dynamic in creative business, leadership, or life, and introduce yourselves in a little bit about who you are and your background. Do I have any volunteers to go first? Go for it, Laura.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Jordan-Bambach. I'm the Chief Creative Officer and President at Grey in London. And I'm also a co-founder of She Says, which is a global volunteer network to get more women into the creative industries. We're in about 55 different cities around the world now. You may have come to one of our events or maybe to one of our Zoom events over the last 12 months. It's been an interesting thing to move a whole global volunteer network online during the pandemic. I guess I am interested both as a senior creative leader and knowing that I'm one of the very kind of still few minority CCOs, female CCOs. You know, I'm quite interested in why I suppose I've had success in my career and kind of what, like how I guess how those power structures have worked to really kind of put me in the place where I am today. And I think I'll talk a little later about more generally, I ran something called the Great British Diversity Experiment. And I think there's some really interesting stuff that came out of that about what makes great creative leadership and power. But in terms of my own personal experience, I think I have been very, very fortunate to have had some incredible mentors and mentorship throughout my career. I would say mostly from men, because they were only ever kind of men above me in the roles that I was pursuing, but some really, really positive allies and mentorship, which has really made the difference to me in my career, and people that hired me on my potential rather than the work that I was capable of at that time as well, and kind of saw me for the potential. And I think that is, you know, when we're talking about how to break the monoculture in creative industries, I think that is one of the things that I've taken forwards then as a leader is making sure that I'm hiring people on potential, not on necessarily their achievements because of whatever it may have been kind of put in their way or whatever opportunities they may or may not have been given. So that's me.
Thanks so much, Laura. Would one of the other panelists like to go next? Xenia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Tara. Well, my name is Xenia Fedorova. I am a journalist originally, and also the president and the chief executive officer of a company called RT France, RT France in French. It's a news channel that I've launched and running right now out of Paris. We are a bit more than 150 people. And surprisingly, probably the only channel where the what is called the égalité between the men and women is actually more than respected. So most of my top management are women. I wonder why. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a second generation journalist. My mother was a journalist and also a great example for me what a woman can achieve, you know, raising 7 children, being a successful journalist and later a businesswoman. She has definitely showed me the way that you can achieve anything you want in this life. RT is part of RT Group, which is also managed by a woman, Margarita Simania, who's been a great mentor to me since the beginning. And I have to add that maybe because I am originally from Russia, in Russia, there is sort of no really big difference between the opportunities that women get at work. It is maybe historically considered that women have the same sort of the same rights, whether it's the Soviet Union or just historically, Russia has always been sort of had a lot of women in power. But I was raised with an idea that, you know, there's absolutely no issue. Well, except for when I moved to work outside of Russia, I kind of learned that it's not exactly the same thing everywhere. And I'll be happy to share a little bit after and answer some questions that you might have.
Thanks so much, Zinnia. Sayla, would you like to go next?
Happy to do so. Hi, everyone. I'm Salai, all the way from sunny South Africa. If you're all in winter, which I assume a lot of you are, I'm sorry, but us in the South are still enjoying the lovely summer. I am the Chief Strategic Officer at an agency called the Odd Number Group, and I'm also the co-founder of the Strategy Network, which is a strategic consultancy here in South Africa. And I'm also part of Class 25, the last class before lockdown. So hi to anyone from Class 25. Danny, I see you. Hi. Very exciting to be part of the Berlin crew and all the amazing work that you guys are doing. So my experience is I'm not going to say unique necessarily, because I think for a lot of Black females, the narrative is one that lies between two worlds, one of gender, in which case there's gender equality issues in my industry and a transformation that is required, but that still falls behind the race issue as well, which is then, Black and transforming the industry in that regard. So in a country where 85% of the population is Black, we have an industry that is still very much white male dominated. And so there have been a lot of initiatives and conversation around what transformation needs to look like in this country. And so even though you get more Black people in the industry, when we start speaking about Black females, it's more on an operational level that they get hired. And secondly, the statistics are now at about 3 to 4% of creative heads in South Africa are Black females. So the number is quite shocking. And, we've heard the answer of they're just hard to find. It's hard to find Black female leadership. And I think my role indirectly, I've just been, I've been a bulldozer and just breaking boundaries in my own right, because I refuse to be limited by my gender and I refuse to be limited by my race. What you see is the more Black women you start seeing in leadership positions within the creative industry, the more you help others to believe that it is possible, the more you create awareness about the industry as well. I think in South Africa, our issues have been the education around getting into the creative industry is quite limited and quite elitist. Not many people know our industry exists. So beyond just race and class, it's just getting that awareness and then attracting the right talent, retaining the talent as a woman as well. And then obviously the bigger issue is promoting the talent that you have. So I'm happy to discuss these nuances and from a gender perspective and from a race perspective. And of course, it's not just a South African narrative, it's a global narrative as well, where, you have to be recognized for being good and for being brilliant and not just being a tick box exercise. And also what you represent when you're in a place of leadership like myself, and how to practically get these numbers going up in our creative industry. So happy to discuss and excited to be amongst all these amazing women.
Awesome, thank you so much. And to our final panelist, the other Laura.
Hi, everyone. Good morning from Brazilian summer. Thank God it's summer here. We are in the quarantine, but at least it's warm. I'm Laura Chiavoni, a woman, working single mother, agency director here at Facebook Brazil. I moved back to Sao Paulo after 4 years in New York and 20 plus years in the creative industry, class 12. Basically a Highlander of the Berlin School. I like to say that my activism comes from my own experiences. And I choose to introduce myself always as a mother, because I think this says a lot about what my life is. And also because as Zinnia, I have a wonderful role model in my mother. When I was born, she was Chief Strategy Officer at JWT, which made me grow up with basically someone from the creative industry at home, facing all the challenges that we've been facing as women for a long, long time. So it was a pretty meaningful experiences. Plus, in terms of the intersectionalities, sorry, this is a terrible word to say, I wanted to share also that I was raised as a privileged white woman in Brazil. I had access to the best education. and had everything that I needed to be raised in from my family. But then it was interesting to learn from how to use the power of being in this position in society, until the moment that I moved to the US. When I moved to the US, I changed the box. I became a Latina woman of color, which was an experience that taught me the world about privilege, about racism, and the challenges of being a minority. So it took me a couple of years to process what everything means. But I think I come from this whole opportunity and experience as someone more humble and even more willing to collaborate with this whole agenda of making the world a better place for everyone. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Laura. And I think it's so interesting how your diversity is often contextual, which you mentioned in your introduction. A little bit like how I found that my diversity or my privilege was by association or through situation, you could say. So before we move into the next question, I'd just like to pause there in case any panelists have any adds or thoughts they want to add to those introductions.
I do. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Rosa, calling from Munich, actually. Sorry.
Dr. Rosa, I'm so sorry.
You have to make your screen bigger. I appear.
I'm calling in from my mobile, so I actually can only see 4 people on my screen at the same time. And it's midnight, but there's no excuses because I'm very excited to have you on the panel, and now I can feel my face going red.
Well, at least I know it's not because I'm a woman that I got forgotten. That's for sure.
I'm so sorry. It's because you, yeah. So please introduce yourself and accept my sincere apologies.
Okay, cool. So I'm Rosa, calling from Munich. I'm in the advertising industry for 15 years. I'm executive strategy director at Service Plan Group, which is a privately owned company operating globally. And very early in my career in another network, I heard a chief creative officer saying, after a long discussion, after a few glasses of beer and wine, he said, "I just think women are less creative than men." And we had a big discussion going on, but that was when I was about 26. And since then, I'm trying to find out why would you even, get to this conclusion, and why would you even say that? And I've experienced throughout my career that women are perceived to be worse leaders and worse at creative jobs. So I did some research myself on just because of my private interest and my confusion that there are only guys up there leading creative agencies, about women in leadership and about, why there are so few women in leadership. And after a few years and a few books, I came to 3 essential observations about why there are so few women in leadership. And observation number 1 is very global and very basic. I think we have to acknowledge that we are living in a world that is designed and created by men and designed and created for men. And that means that we will always be somebody different, somebody from exterior intruding the economy. And that's something that's not new, that Simone de Beauvoir wrote that like 40 years ago. We are the other kind. And to keeping that back in my mind helped me to understand why things are just a little bit more complicated than for guys. And just think about it, the economic models that we are working with and that create our economy today, they are made by men, and they're leaving out the perspective of women, and they're leaving out the perspective that there are millions of hours of care work done by women every day for their kids, for the elderly, for the poor, for the sick, which keeps the economy going at the end of the day, but no model acknowledges that. So that is my first observation, why we have a tougher time to thrive in an economic system that's not made for us. My second observation is that very naturally, and that's very basic too, power is not given away for free. Nobody says, oh, I got power, want to have some, you know, and nobody, I experience they're not even capable of giving away 50% of the power. So power is something you have to fight for, and you have to demand, you have to stand up and say, I'm eligible to have that too, because we want a fair and democratic society. And in order to achieve that, you have to give away power. And we can experience that in Europe right now, and in Germany especially, that for 15 years in my career, when I thought, okay, feminism done, you know, we can do that. And after 15 years, nothing has changed. No numbers in the leadership boards have risen. Now the quotas are here, which force businesses to include women. All of a sudden they are there, magically, women on boards, you know, just past week, women came into DAX 30 corporations one by one. They were there already waiting, ready to go, you know, and just the sanction and the quota from politics helped to do that. So that's my second observation, power is not given away for free. And my third observation is something I did a lot of research on, is gender stereotypes. We've all heard about that. And gender stereotypes are, for me, the driving force for all the obstacles we are facing during our career. And I think it's a global phenomenon, and that's something I really want to also hear from other countries. Global phenomenon puts men into power roles, women into care roles. Even Xenia, in Russia, we see the most women in leadership. But at the end of the day, they do both things. They do care and work and business work. You know, it's for me, it seems to be a global phenomena that, you know, women are not believed to be capable of handling power. This varies a little bit by industry, and this varies a little bit by country, but gender stereotypes are very present. And my research showed that in Germany, it is still very, very present, and it's still there. And that's why sometimes you need to force people to get over these gender stereotypes and introduce quotas.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And again, my apologies. I think you had some really great observations there. I think one stuck out for me, which was your second observation. I think when we remove privilege, it feels like discrimination. And I think this is our biggest barrier and hurdle to overcome, is how do we actually incentivize the people in positions of power, which currently are male, to give up some of that privilege, to make room for more females to join them in leadership positions. I'm going to move on to the next question, and would like to ask the panelists what advice or recommendations about addressing and changing inequitable power dynamics would you give younger women, younger creative leaders, or other professionals? Xenia, given your experience with mentorship with younger women, would you like to share your experience first?
Thanks, Tara. Well, I have to admit that whenever I give an advice to younger women, I never think of them as someone who is sort of second degree. You know, the thing is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, at my company, we've got mostly women on the top managerial positions, but also on air, women journalists. It's not because I give women more opportunities than I give men. It's simply because I give opportunities to people who are creative, people who are willing to have those opportunities. I think it's really important to remember that for a successful company, you have to build a team that is made of people motivated, willing to achieve something. For example, I've got great examples of young journalists, women journalists who want to travel, not just, you know, to do simple stories, because as I said, I am in the media industry in journalism, so we cover news. And sometimes news are ugly and there are wars. And what is surprising is that when we call people to volunteer, whether they want to go, reporters want to go to cover a hotspot situation, which is dangerous, there are plenty of women willing to volunteer. So you know, for me, I am giving women these opportunities. I am never stopping them from doing something because, well, war is a dangerous place for a girl. You know, I never say that because me, myself, I worked with remarkable women reporters. One of them is my big friend, Paula Sleer, who is RT's Middle East bureau chief. And she pretty much covered every single war in that area and around the world. And sometimes it's much harder for women to get through, but at the same time, you know, women get to find and connect with people easier. For example, Paula managed to get inside of the Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon and made amazing reports about women and children and the conditions. And she was only allowed because she was a girl. And my point here is really, Tara, I think that we ourselves, we need to start breaking the stereotypes. We need to ask for more. We need to be more sort of dynamic. When I worked in Germany, I realized that girls are not always really, you know, trying hard to get to a new position or job because culturally they were sort of, they were framed a little bit differently. And I think it's also part of the culture. And my worst experience about, sorry to say that, Rhoda, but my worst experience about being sort of treated differently as a woman was in Germany, especially by men who are in the media technical part, and the technical business is dominated by men. And if you see a girl who actually comes to, I don't know, IBC international exhibitions on broadcast equipment, definitely you are considered and perceived differently than men. But as I said, for me, what is important is to build a team of people who are motivated, who are willing to do things. And I tend to give opportunities to girls to test out things, you know, to try to go out in the field and see if they are good for that or not. That would be my biggest advice would be girls, just like guys, you know, you have to ask for it. You have to want to achieve things, because otherwise nobody's going to take you by the hand and say, because you're a girl, I'm going to give you this opportunity, since, you know, our ratio is a little bit unequal here, because that's not how things work. We have to ourselves break the stereotypes and show that we're capable of doing things. We are creative, we are intelligent, we are hardworking, we're responsible, we can do everything. That would be my small advice.
I think it's really interesting you're recounting your experience in Germany. I've been reading a little bit about problems with diversity and gender rates in computer science, and there's a misconception that that's a pipeline issue, and we've actually seen since 2014 to 2019 less women enter computer science. And when female engineers and scientists have been interviewed, their reason has been that it's down to bias that they've received once they're in the workplace, which is actually causing them from not staying in that industry and wanting to drop out. I'd love to hand it over to any other panelists who might have thoughts on this question. Laura?
Sorry.
That's okay. Sorry, I'll be quick. Yeah, look, I think I did want to share what I learned throughout this experience of doing the Great British Diversity Experiment with young women. So it was the largest practical experiment in looking at whether diverse teams make better creative work, and if so, why? And if so, also, why do we not see more diverse teams within the industry? And why don't we actually see diversity as a whole, not just around women, but all sorts of diversity? And actually, one of the biggest findings, which was so interesting, is that our idea of leadership in the creative industries is very much this idea of like the rock star or the auteur or the, you know, this almost like this creative gift that's being given down to this person who then expunges it on everyone else. And that is a very, you could call it an alpha male way of working, you could call it a very confident, extroverted way of working, whatever you want to call it, but that way of working doesn't allow diverse teams to coalesce and have the great ideas that they otherwise could have. So you don't get the benefit of diversity and diverse teams if you have leadership like that. And actually it was super interesting to see, we had 40 very senior industry folk give their time. So they're passionate about diversity because they committed their time over sort of a 12-week period. But those teams that had leaders in place that led that way, even though those leaders wanted diversity, could see the positivity of diversity and wanted it to happen, could not get their teams to function in a highly creative, really valuable way. And the teams that had the most brilliant ideas, that came together, that worked best, had a completely different kind of leadership, which is much more about, I guess you would call it shepherding, or providing a safe place to fail, or providing some kind of clarity and some context, but allowing people to come to their own decisions together. Those teams were the ones that really, really excelled. And that as a leadership quality, which is not necessarily always a female leadership quality, but is seen more so, I think, in female leaders than men, is often used as the reason not to promote females into leadership, right? So I've had, through the experience that she says, I speak to a lot of women who get to a certain level, and then they're told they're just not leadership material. But what that often means is they don't adhere to this kind of like alpha male dominating way of leading a team, as if that's the only way. And I think if I was to give advice to young female creatives, is however you want to lead, whether that is with strength or with kind of softness, that's absolutely brilliant. And you should also, when you're looking at where you're going to be working, look for places that have a different kind of leadership, because not only will you probably have more success there, but everyone that comes from a different kind of a background will have more success in those environments.
Dr. Rosa, after you.
No, go for it.
Wanted to respond to Xenia's remark on Germany, because that's a country I'm currently working in, and I felt a little bit alien when I got here. I'm from Austria, and I thought, woohoo, Germany, you're an economic force, you're big, you're massive, you should be very liberal about women. They're not. So I made some research on gender stereotypes, comparing France with Germany and Hungary. And Germany, you think about it, is world leading, and they have a woman in their political lead, but they're only, in the middle or below the middle of gender equality in the Gender Equality Index of Europe. And in my research, it turned out that the gender stereotypes are very persistent in Germany, that women are, better off staying at home. And this is partly due to the fact that they used to offer little care for children. So you put your kids only into kindergarten or kita when they were 3 years old. So moms stayed at home for 3 years, and they still do, because society expects mothers to stay at home. And it's so strong in their culture. And it's strong in the culture of Austria and Switzerland too. So there's nothing special to Germany. But you would imagine, a country that came so far would be promoting women to carry on their careers. And in regards to what Xenia also said, how she is promoting or empowering young women by talent and by their will to lead. This is great in countries where you are a step further, and Russia is a step further. When you're in countries like Germany, where you still have these persisting stereotypes, I think it is very important for leaders to support any woman that has the will to thrive. Even if you don't like her, even if you think she's not good. In countries where we are so far behind, we need to champion and applaud every woman that is wanting to lead and that is wanting to take a career. And, the further we get, the more we can, look at different qualities and, and talents and stuff like that. But at the moment, we are here right now, we need to applaud every woman. And I expect all the women that are in leadership positions because of their quotas, that they take the responsibility and motivate and mentor young women to get into their seats one day, so we don't need quotas anymore. And that's something I really want to, spread the word to all women in leadership positions, especially in Germany, because they sometimes say, those young women, they have to work as hard as I did. No, I want my daughter, she was just born half a year ago, that she doesn't have to work twice as much as a guy just to get up there.
If I can just follow up on what you just said, just quick. Oh, I'm sorry. Just quickly. I totally agree with Rosa. I think it's important to support every girl, but I think we should be very careful because there's a huge responsibility on us, on women in leadership positions. And if we put someone who is not ready or not good enough, it will only damage the whole picture and will be harder for other women to get there. I think that we should make sure that the girls that we are promoting to leadership positions are ready for it. They're ready to take the fight. They're ready to respond. They can be as good as guys, because if they are worse and they've been given a position just because they're girls, it's a bit too tough, I think, on everyone, on every girl who will follow after. Sorry, Salai, go on.
No worries. I think to the points that you've all been making, and not trying to repeat everything, I think to take it down to a very granular level, in my experience, a lot of the young women that I've spoken to, and I'm still young myself, so I can relate with them. The perception is that women that do make it, we're born with some kind of special gene, that we're special human beings that don't have these internal dialogues and issues. And so it feels that attaining a position of leadership is only for that select few. And the questions that I usually get asked is, how did you overcome your internal voice of inferiority? How did you overcome your insecurity in order for you to actually step up and be the leader that you are today? And so I think on a very nuanced and granular level, some of the most powerful messages that I've gotten from my mentors, and which is always a good place to start, is the internal voice that we women have that we need to overcome first and foremost. And when we're not having those conversations openly, there's this gap between thinking that if you feel inferior at all, I mean, even Michelle Obama, when she had her first day in the White House, felt like she didn't belong. We live in when you grew up in a patriarchal society, or a society that tells you that you are less than, or you grew up in an industry that is white male dominated, there are these internal struggles that we need to overcome. And as much as, women leadership, you can do it, go for it. If we're not handling and allowing girls to know that, yes, the voice will be there, yes, the doubt will be there, and if it is there, there's nothing wrong with you, you're not less than, you're not less capable. It's because of the society that you brought in, and here are the tools for you to overcome those in order to be where you need to be, because they happen. And for us to ignore them is then ignoring a very important insight and a nuance, where our biggest barriers are sometimes not the external ones that society puts on us, but it's those internal voices that have, been reinforced from generation to generation of how we've been raised as a society. So for me, it's really acknowledging those aspects that are within, from a woman point of view, and saying, let's overcome those. Let's have a conversation. It's okay to feel them, but don't let that limit you from going to that next level. And every single woman here has had that experience. And so you are not less than by thinking and feeling that way at some point in your career.
That's amazing. Salah, if I could just jump in for a second, just to pick up of what you just said, I was going to mention that fighting the bias, starting with the bias from within, as you were mentioning, this internal voice is, I think, the first challenge for us to overcome, and also encourage other women to do so. I have the privilege to mentor women across the globe in many different programs, and I've been hearing a lot from many of them, afraid of not being able, especially the younger ones, afraid of not being able to balance work and family in the future, or thinking that they have to postpone their personal plans in order to be successful in their careers. It's very hard for them to find role models and find guidance through the way, right? To learn different tools and ways in how they can manage to have a successful career, and at the same time follow their personal plans through. And plus, there are lots of assumptions from the outside of women, as you said, they're not capable, or they don't have the time, or just assumptions that they don't want to, that they don't have the willingness to. I think those are key assumptions that sometimes prevent women to receive opportunities, because they're not asked if they are willing to do so. So the power starts when women are able to feel the entitlement of themselves, that they can do that. So for me, our power needs to be used with honor in a meaningful way. And that means to make difference to others, to help them to show up, to help them to speak up. And also we have this opportunity with our power to serve our community. And this is the type of leadership that Laura was referring to, which is about making sure that each one of the different members of that you are leading are able to bring value to the table, their values and their skills, not using a homogeneous rule, but a diverse one, because this is the only way that we can ensure more robustness, more muscles to the discussion in terms of creativity and more ways of thinking. If we can find a way to show people their power, right? Show them what they can do, engage with them to show them how they can influence, how they can be persuasive. Also seeing them the blind spots and uncover new possibilities, because sometimes all those biases, they keep people straight, not seeing everything they are able to do, to use their creativity, to also being generous. I think being able to and available to mentor individuals and not only teams, I think requires a lot of time, but it pays out, right? And this is a way for me of using power by multiplying power in a more sustainable way for the future.
I love what you just said, Laura, the idea of finding ways as a female creative leader to multiply power. And I think looking at the work that Laura's done with She Says in the past, programs like that, that's exactly what they enable. Before I move on, would any of the other panelists like to contribute to that discussion before we move to the next question?
I would like just one thought towards Laura. And other panelists, I can sense this general notion that you as a woman, you carry it in yourself and it's your job to thrive, right? Which is definitely part of it. I just don't like the idea that it is the responsibility of an individual to change a system. You know, you are the only woman in the agency probably who sees that. And there are 300 other people working day in, day out for the past 50 years. Advertising exists, nobody saw it until then. So this is a very tough fight you would start, you know. And I just want to take the pressure off of young women saying, okay, if you got the power, you know, and all the advertising that's actually empowering or trying to empower women. Think of the Glass Lions, you know, always Procter & Gamble. Yeah, do it like a girl, or Facebook, lean in, you know, and it's a nice story, but in reality, we saw it's not healthy. It puts you in a weird competitive situation with men. Who is responsible for changing the system is a society as a whole. Our associations can do something, politics can do something, and I'm repeating myself, but the moment that really changed something in Germany is when politics said, we are going to introduce quotas. And all of a sudden, women in leadership, that's it. And it's not, I know you should do it and you should speak up. If you see discrimination, you should speak up and say, I want that leadership role. But I just want to encourage young women not to feel pressured, you know, that it's all in your individual
Can I just add to that, Rosa, because I think you're absolutely right. By all means, you know, we all need to speak up, and there are certain things that we need to address in the way that we've been brought up, and actually being brought up in this culture that's been created for and by men. You know, it is a really important thing for us to try to break it, but it is not our responsibility to break the system or to change the system on our own. And I think I wish I could remember her name because she's amazing. She's a creative director, I believe, at maybe McCann in Manchester here in the UK. and she's done a PhD looking at why young female creatives either don't enter the industry or disappear very, very quickly, much earlier than what you would expect with, you know, for children or what have you. What she found in her research was because you're told as a young woman that you can achieve anything you want. If you do it, you can achieve it. It's going to be brilliant. Then you get into the workforce and you're not promoted and you're not listened to and you are talked over and your ideas are taken and presented as someone else's. That is the system that's broken. But because women have been told they can achieve it all, what she found is a lot of these young women then internalized that as, oh, it's just that I'm not good enough, and then left the industry. And I think to your point, it's very important to say you are good enough. Absolutely, you're good enough. So, you know, like push and push and push. But some of the times when you're not being heard or you don't feel like you're having that success, it is not necessarily down to you, it's down to the system.
Yeah, I think I kind of echo that to all of the panelists' sentiment, which is just being a female in an industry that's not designed for you is enough. So I think that's a really good message and point that the panelists drew across. I think it also leads into what you're saying just then, Laura, around, and other panelists touched on, is that internal voice that we have as female creatives. And I think I loved the Michelle Obama example that, you know, and you, if you're watching the tabloids at the moment, with Meghan Markle's as well. And I wonder, like, would you encounter imposter syndrome when you enter the firm in Buckingham Palace or the White House if the White House was more inclusive? So for me too, I wonder too, is if we can solve inclusivity in our agencies and help allies grow and help members of creative agencies become more inclusive, will that help with retention with female creatives moving forward? So another thing to discuss, but already a fantastic discussion, and thank you so much for sharing all of those thoughts. I'd like to move on to the next question to make sure that we've got plenty of time for audience questions at the end. And I would like to ask the panelists, as while power inequities may exist across different cultures, they impact women, creative leaders in different ways. How do you yourselves engage power, take it and use it, and change the dynamics in your business and life so they're more equitable? Dr. Rosa, I still have tremendous guilt for forgetting to pass it over to you into the introduction. So I'd love to give this question to you first, given that guilt and also your experience.
Sure. I think I already answered that one in our previous discussion, which is good because it's interactive. And for me, what I do, I share, I give thumbs. I share with other women in the company my observations and my research, and I spread the word wherever I can. And it's all you can do as an individual is you know, spreading the word, speaking up. And if you don't feel acknowledged in a company, get the fuck out of it, you know. And that's what I'm trying to communicate. Yeah, that's how I use my power. My power is information, and I'm spreading the word. I'm not getting tired of it. And we've been spreading information for the past 50 years. And the more we know and the more we can, you know, inform, and you say we need allies, and we totally do. If we can inform our male partners in the company, and, you know, they feel like it's not a topic for them because it says women on it, you know. But if we can engage them into these discussions and inform them. Apparently I made the experience that even if you just try to inform people, it is very hard in the creative industry to get this information going, because you're opening up a field where there's a lot of work to do. And some companies just are afraid of the work this would mean.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. I think also too, this discussion of retention and women dropping out of the industry is interesting and why that is. From some of the reading that I've been doing recently, I think people in creative leadership assume that women are dropping out. That's why I really liked your insights, Laura, from the Manchester City. There's this assumption that you need to create these elaborate, increase shared working roles and create all of these conditions for women to stay in. But research actually is showing that the reason why women are dropping out is also comes down to pay and pay equity, which I've found quite fascinating as well, which means that creative leaders, if they create strategies for retention for creative women and talent, that actually is quite a nice solution, because it then crosses over to their male talent as well. I'm going to complete tangent here. I'd like to just go back to the question that I was asked to ask and see if any other panelists would like to forget my tangent and finish off where Dr. Rosa did.
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. Just in terms of power, I think for me, my journey has been to understand my power first. Because to Laura's point, when the creative head or the heads of the creative industry are this rock star archetype masculine, you sort of ask yourself, if I'm not that type of archetype, then do I belong in that industry? And so is there a place for my feminine energy to be in leadership? And so to step back and understand what my power is and what my leadership power is and what I'm bringing to the table, for me, was the first step. So in my agency, we're very pro-women, we're very pro-Black women, we're very pro-transformation. I think we as a group are quite disruptive in the sense that we are the underdogs that are championing these types of narratives in our industry as well. So, and that comes with understanding that I don't have to necessarily be a rock star archetype, but alas, I am a rock star in my own right. It just is not wearing a checkered shirt and does not have a beard. But, I'm creating this archetype that other young women that look on can say, oh, there is a space for a unique individual to be unique and to be brilliant and to be excellent in their own right. And then somehow this industry embraces her and accepts her. So there might be room for me too. There is a room for leading with vulnerability. There is a room for being a vulnerable creative and doing things differently. And so the more you acknowledge the role that you play in really owning your power, the more you give permission for other people to do the same. And then secondly, it's also another way of understanding the power is understanding that as a female leader in whatever industry across the world, that you are an emblem, and not taking on the responsibility necessarily of changing the world by yourself, but by just being there, you become an example for others as well. And that in itself is a powerful place to be. So you are cognizant of that, you are aware of that, and you're aware of the responsibility that comes with as well. And, when you keep doing what you're doing, you become an inspiration. And for me, that's how I managed to overcome it and be in the industry myself with the works that I've done, is by seeing other women like yourselves going for it and being rock stars in their own right. So for me, that's where the power dynamic lies in my world.
If I may jump in for a second, just to, follow up this amazing conversation. I think you're being super inspireful. I'm already thankful for everything that I'm listening. And I think one thing that I think makes a difference, strikes me, is that from the point of view of leadership, it's our possibility to help people to have choices and the opportunity to choose. Not everyone are going to want the same path, but if we are able to help them to acknowledge themselves and their talent, to know that they can choose, I think is a huge step forward. As leaders, we are role models, willing or not. This one is not up to us, we are. So acknowledging that we are role models, making sure that what type of example you are giving, it's a way to acknowledge that we are going to make a difference in the future of people, in the way that they feel about themselves, in the way they are encouraged or not to follow what they're willing to do. So in my case, I choose to fight the good fight I choose to fight biases and transform the status quo every day. This is my personal choice. I choose to show up as being this person. I choose to be conscious about all these challenges around all of us all the time. And I also know that it takes a lot of effort to make this whole environment to be more friendly and find more equitable opportunities for all of us, from the higher levels of governments, but also, and I think it will never work if we don't collaborate from within in every single space that we occupy, from our homes and our daily routine at work. I think all of those gestures makes us consistently create an environment of change. And it's a choice that we have, the same way that it's a choice of people that work with us to use all of this as opportunities for them to thrive.
Wow,
Thank you, Laura.
Sorry, I was just
Great.
about to say I totally adore this conversation. I am ready to sign under everything that Salai said. Laura, girls, I think you're absolutely right. And I agree that, you know, spreading a message is super important. But for me, it is really doing my job every day. And every time I would participate, let's say in an event, in a media conference, which is not at all related to the rights of women, but being on the panel among those guys, you know, being able to voice my opinion, I think that's already a good, it gives a good idea to other women that yes, you know, eventually I could be the one there. I could get to the point where I could be running a company. I could be being in a leadership position. I think it's really important. And on every level, the things that, you know, I fight every day, and I'm actually maybe going to bring up one topic that is a huge one, and we're not going to have time to talk about it, but it's harassment at work against women. And this is something that I got acquainted in France with, and I was shocked as a manager, as the head of the company, to learn about situations that literally happen from time to time in the newsroom. Not necessarily sexual harassment, but, you know, inappropriate jokes, humiliation of girls among some other guys because they just don't feel where is this border. And this is something I'm totally intolerant to. And I think this is a really important part of a job of a leader, to be able to see what is the culture of your company and not to give any space to that type of harassment, because this is the environment where no girl would want to stay if she is being constantly joked on or being harassed one way or another by another guy. For me, this is the fight that I learned to take basically when I moved to France. And I learned that in the culture of some men journalists, it is totally normal to make inappropriate jokes against girls. And, you know, as a girl, as a woman in the company, I would never tolerate that. So, but that's a different topic. I'm sure that we won't have time to touch it, but I think it's important.
And I guess I should just jump in at the end then before we move on to the next question. So I guess I am a firm believer that actually as a creative industry, we have the skills, like it's our superpower, right? To be able to build something new and put into practice this vision of the future that we would like to see in a way that is a lot more powerful than a lot of other people in a lot of other industries, right? Because we are setting this vision of the future. We are able to communicate en masse, not even with our own money, with the money from brands, you know, to be able to really show what a progressive future for women and for other marginalized communities could be. So I think the way that I use my power is, first of all, going, if there is a problem, how can I put my creativity to use to try to fix it in whatever way? That's where She Says came from. And I've sort of founded a number of different kind of initiatives and sort of projects through the years to try to make more equality happen more often. But it's also something that is within my power to change as a creative individual as well. So making sure that I'm showing that vision of the future that I think is right, making sure, you know, when I'm doing my casting, who am I casting in the films that I'm making, or in the advertising that I'm making? Who have I got behind the camera? Who have I got kind of working, you know, within the creative industries to make things happen, and making sure that, because I can, I'm making decisions that are for the benefit of women and other people who otherwise wouldn't have a voice, I guess. So.
Thank you, Laura. I feel like you can't discover any more problems because you've already initiated so many initiatives and startups to solve them. So stop looking. You don't have capacity for any more. I'm always amazed in how much that Laura manages to do for good. I think I totally agree with Laura's last comments. I think as advertisers, you have this massive microphone. Advertising informs culture, and I don't know if this power has been taken as seriously as it should have, and that's why we have negative stereotypes, and we really do need the cross-section of society that make up our audiences actually creating the work that's predicted them to get to authentic advertising that they relate to and their communities relate to. So with that, I am really pleased now to reintroduce Megan from the Berlin School, who, given I am dialing in on my mobile phone, is going to help facilitate some of the questions that have been coming in through the chat over the session, and allow plenty of time to answer audience questions.
Thank you, Tara. Yeah, I was just following along the comments, and it's been a lot more of comments and just like right on, Rosa. I hear that, Laura, like just a lot of feedback in regards to the commentary. But one question that just stuck out from the beginning was one from JK asking, what are possible ways to make yourself heard as women alongside just producing or doing great work?
That's a proper awesome question. I'll answer really quickly, because I think you have to take into consideration the fact, as Rosa said, like that the system is kind of set against us a little bit, and sometimes despite your best efforts, you're not heard. So it's not ideal, but there are some really simple things that you can do to make sure that you're heard. Number one, find someone, buddy up with someone who is going to be your cheerleader within the agency. So I'd suggest this to any young person that is finding it difficult to be heard. Sometimes if someone's not listening to you, to have someone else in the room that said, Laura just said that, or Laura said that first, or what have you, and you can do the same, is really, really powerful. So it's just someone that can be your advocate, I guess. That works really well. The second one is, if you're in a meeting, go in 2 minutes early and sit in the seat right in the middle of the meeting. I know that sounds really, really silly, but if you're in the middle, it's much sort of harder for people not to give you any attention. So just, it would be lovely if you didn't have to do these things, but those things, I kind of find really, really useful. So.
Another one came through the Q&A. What do you think about women who feel the need to lead, acting like a man to be validated in the workplace? For an example, being tough or too rational, or trusting men more than they trust women in their teams, etc. And how can we define the boundaries between that behavior and unauthentic leadership?
I'll start. I think, as I mentioned earlier, for me, my personal experience has been in understanding my power and not being apologetic about, I guess, my uniqueness and my way of leading, and not being apologetic about being a woman and doing things differently in that regard. And to the point that was made earlier, it's one thing having that conviction as an individual, but it's something that is much more difficult and almost near impossible if you're trying to achieve it alone. So engaging my male counterparts, being in a leadership position, means that on an exco level, I can have these types of conversations that start to create that kind of culture and bring awareness to my male counterparts for the unconscious ways in which they're reinforcing a culture where masculinity is celebrated more than the female, talent in the agency. So from an exco level, having those conversations, challenging the male counterparts, challenging the culture of the agency, challenging what we celebrate, bringing awareness, because sometimes it's really a lack of awareness that, you know, indirectly, this is what I'm reinforcing in the culture of our way of working, essentially. And once you get that right on an exco level, and you bring attention to that from, you know, with the powers that be, and mostly being men, you allow it to trickle down. And that has been my personal experience. And then, you know, engaging with the women, celebrating the women, and allowing them to feel empowered as they are. And allowing them to know that how they present their ideas, how they dress, that you can rock in heels and lipstick and still be an award-winning creative. And that is fantastic. We celebrate that. So it is starting from the top, breaking down those boundaries, bringing around the awareness with your male counterparts, and allowing that to trickle down as an agency culture. In the ideal world, where you have that kind of agency that allows for that, it's fantastic. But it is a bigger struggle with bigger multinationals where it's a tradition, a long enforced tradition that you're trying to break down.
Well, what I would like to add here is that I agree that we should not try to be someone we are not. The more authentic we are, the better it works. Otherwise, we will just seem fake. But you know, I happen to find myself sometimes in a room of assholes. Okay, when I was younger. And I was not confident at all at that point of time. And it was hard to stand up and against those guys who actually didn't take you for someone serious. And I had a similar situation a couple of years ago with a girl who was put in a leadership position by me. And she was overseeing a department of guys who just didn't want to accept her at all. And unfortunately, she thought that the best way would be to be even more harsh, even more aggressive, even more dominant. And it didn't end well, because in the end of the day, she was so harsh, so aggressive, so dominant that, you know, one of the guys had a breakdown. And she had to take some classes, and, you know, she had a mentor who was coaching her how to, you know, to be able to lead the team without having to try to maybe mirror or mimic the man's behavior. I think it's a tough challenge for us. You know, when you end up in an industry which is dominant by men, and then you are this girl, and they don't really want to be led by you, because not everyone is nice and gentle, and some of them want your position. It's hard not to fall into this. And you know, my advice would be, you already have the power. If you were put on this position, you know, you already have the power and the means to pass a message. Just be patient, be who you are, you know, and if you feel like things are not working out at that particular moment with your team or with a team that you're working with, go to your manager, talk to your manager, explain the situation. You know, you have to inform your management without being afraid to seem a failure, because that's the biggest problem some girls have. They are afraid to say that they're experiencing problems with a team or with a colleague, because they don't want to give an impression that they're failing at the job that they were giving. I think it's really important to, you know, to really openly discuss the situation and find the ways to reach out and to show your male colleagues that you are actually capable, you are smart, and you were put in this position for a reason, because you deserve it, because you have something to share. But also listen to the others. It's important that you listen, because if you only do it one way and you speak down to them, it will never work. You have to take some advices back and learn from them as well. I think that helps.
Thank you. Piggybacking on that, if you could choose just one word of advice for young men professionals, what would that be?
I would like to respond to that. I would like to, you know, find a way to incentivize men to take equal responsibility of bringing up our next generation. And I'm not sure how this is going to work. And that's actually not something I made up. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, equality is reached when men and women alike take the responsibility of bringing up our next generation, because taking care of kids is one of the biggest career obstacles, obviously. And I think, again, this is just a matter of incentivation on one hand, because if you have more women in leadership, you know, who is taking care of the kids back home? So, you know, it's just a simple equation. So I would encourage every man, you know, to get into the joy of taking care of the kids. It's fun too at times. So I'm trying to educate my husband on that too currently.
I would say, just to add on that, I would say that, and that's not for young men, but also for young men, maybe acknowledging that we all have biases. We all have preconceptions about gender, about race, about cultural backgrounds. I think the first step is acknowledging that we have been raised in this world with all sorts of different understandings and biases in culture. It's a great step for us to question if the decision that we are making, if the comment that we are making are the best ones for the world that we want in terms of progress. Because we all, and I'm including myself in this, we all need to have one wake-up call once or more than one, depends on how stubborn you are. But we all need to have a wake-up call during our lives, in the professional world, in the personal world. We always bump into our own biases and the consequences of this. So if we're able to acknowledge that, I think this is a wonderful beginning to start a more equitable place for everyone.
Just to add on to that, Laura, so I was working on a strategy in South Africa for gender-based violence. My country, unfortunately, being where some of the highest rates of GBV are prevalent. And the research that was done, you know, there were some insights that were revealed around just the relationship that men have within themselves with the concept of femininity and being threatened by it. In a world where, a patriarchal world where, you know, you are put on a pedestal, when a rise of femininity starts to come up, there's a threat, and so you want to suppress that as much as possible. And I think this is where some of the tensions come into be. And psychologists that deal with men around gender-based violence and etc., one of the things that they get them to do is being able to open themselves up to femininity, and acknowledging the power of femininity within themselves as well, because we're a balance of both to certain degrees. And then developing that healthy relationship and challenging themselves, breaking down the barriers. I think we as women have had to do that so many times in order to be in this industry and carve our way and be leaders in a masculine, patriarchal society. And so that we're doing the work. Young women have to do the work. And I think that it's a challenge to young boys and young men and men to do the work within themselves as well, and breaking down their own stereotypes and biases and unlearn to embrace, you know, a new world order essentially. And I think when we stop being threatened, and it's us versus them, and we start to have that openness and that vulnerability, we start to see more equity in the workplace as well.
I can just say, hire more girls. They are super responsible and you will succeed in your team. But maybe also to add that, you know, guys, you don't have to feel threatened by us. I mean, it's just all about equality. We're talking about equal rights in professional, in business, in all industries. That's pretty much it. But we totally respect your masculinity, and we totally accept the fact that we are women and you are men. But I think that, you know, being more open-minded and, you know, getting girls in your team, we'll see that they're actually super responsible and super productive.
Thank you, Zinnia. I think we have time for one more question from the audience and one slip through here. Being a woman, how important is it to advocate for yourself to build this new culture of equality? And how can young girls develop the confidence to do so in workplaces that are still flooded with misogyny and different types of harassment?
I mean, that's a big one, right? That's a big ask, and it's a really, really good one, because I think, yes, absolutely, you need to advocate for yourself, but the reality is that there are more consequences. There just are for women that kind of speak up and speak out than there are for men. So I would come back to, when I was talking about finding an advocate or finding a cheerleader, it can be you and it should be you, but it can and should also be others. And going back to the previous questions about what young male creatives can do to create a supportive environment and to speak up, not on behalf of, but alongside the young women in your agency, and make sure that they're getting their fair share of the spotlight as well is really important, because it can be really, really hard. But I would always advocate doing it anyway. If you can, you should, and if you can't, speak to someone who can kind of support you to get there.
Megan, is there time to respond to Carlos' question? Because I would like to respond to that.
Yes, by all means.
He was asking, I see that in Brazil, women are still a long way from the highest corporate positions. Which countries are women most present at corporate executive levels? That's actually a question I was really interested in myself, and it's really hard to make a global comparison. And there's just a book came out, and just wanted to show you that. It's in German, though. It's from Mrs. Lewinsky, and she's comparing countries and doing deep dive interviews with 100 executive women. And she found out that she didn't particularly tap into Brazil, but she compared Russia, China, Germany, Japan, and some other countries. And she found out that in China and Russia, actually, there are the most women in C-level suites. And the reason being is the care work, and that there's a huge support from that coming from back in the days, communism and the Soviet Union, and that historically kind of shaped the tradition that women are also good at working. Oh, surprise! And Germany, it sucks, it's embarrassing. And in Europe, it is that you can see that UK and France are doing pretty good in having women in C-level suites. In France, I know it's also due to care work, care responsibility of man taking the responsibility of care work, and there are differences in countries, and it's really interesting to look into that as to why women have a hard time or don't have such a hard time.
Just one.
Thanks so much.
Can I just share one quick comment in terms of advice for young women? So I wanted to quote someone that I met in one of the 3% conferences maybe 5 years ago. Her name is Carla Harris. She is the vice chairman of Morgan Stanley in New York, and she's one of remarkable women. And she likes to say that in our career, we have two types of currencies. We have the performance currency and the relationship currency. And the thing about women is that normally we like to think that our work speaks for ourselves, whereas actually our relationships, they have the same weight in our career and how we're going to drive our career along the way. So just echoing what Laura said, I think my advice is don't go alone. You should always nurture relationships with people around you that will be able to speak up on your behalf when you're not in the room, because this is going to happen tons of times. And the only way to do that is to make sure that you show yourself to people, to get to people to know you, who you are, what you believe, and what your value, what you can bring to the table. So it's not only about your work, so actually your output of your work, but also what you as a person contribute to the places where you work and your communities.
I really love that last piece of advice. I think personally in my career, I've received every opportunity, a new job from a relationship that was built earlier on in my career. And I think the one thing for me with relationships is it's invest in them, and they may not pay dividends immediately, and you'll be surprised in 2 or 3 years' time if that person that you've made an impression on is looking for someone of your talents. You could become top of mind, and it could completely change the trajectory of your career. That's happened to me, and I think that's really, really sound advice, and a great way to close the audience questions. We have 10 minutes left before we move to the closing. We've had such a big conversation today, and it's been really fascinating to kind of unpick and hear from these amazing minds of the women that have joined us on the panel. Is there anything, closing thoughts, remarks, panelists, that you'd like to throw out there before we close the session today? Anything to motivate the audience to go forward and fight the good fight and encourage others to do the same?
I'll go for it. Just firstly, just for the women in the panel, I think I'm proud of you. I'm so inspired by each and every one of you. And I think, just representing women from different parts of the world, you are awesome. And we may not hear that enough. You're awesome just as you are. As female leaders, you're actually being an example to so many others. And just know that you're inspirational. And the women that are in the attendees as well, we hope this session has not only inspired you, but that you go on and you disrupt your own industries. And, we hope that we've added value. But just knowing that as a woman and as you are powerful, you are valid, you definitely belong. And once we start breaking the boundaries within ourselves, we're able to really take this world, this creative industry to new levels. And I'm very excited to see what the future holds for the women in our industry. So that's my 2 cents to end things off.
Oh man, that's so lovely. I guess what I would say to all the women in the audience, and I absolutely, yes, every single woman on this panel, I've just had such a good time today. I think as a senior woman, very often on International Women's Day, I don't want to say you get International Women's Day fatigue, but you do get asked to do a lot and you want to give a lot because you want to change a lot. But this has been one of the most enjoyable things I've done in such a long time. So thank you for organising. But I'd say to the people in the audience, remember as well, we're in the creative industries, it should be fun. Like we should be able to have fun with this as well. And that we have the power if we're not having fun, and we have the power if no one is listening to us to vote with our feet. I think Dr. Rosa said something really great, which is if you're pushing against something, it doesn't change, get out of there. You don't always have the opportunity to do that, but I think, do remember that is in front of you as well. And the more amazing women and, other people from marginalized communities coalescing around the brilliant places to work and the brilliant things to do, the less power those places that maybe aren't moving with the times will have. So that's my 2 cents worth.
I want to add something to that, and I totally agree. There are lists and indexes out there that just tell you where there's an equal share of diversity in a company. I mean, right now we haven't changed the world, but there are companies at the forefront and you can pick and choose them. And you might have better chances there. Plus, in addition, choose your husband wisely. Choose your husband wisely. It's a different story when you get a baby. I tell you that. Check all the boxes that he's the right guy who's taking equal responsibility, so your career will go on after those 3 months of breastfeeding. Okay.
Choose your husband or your wife wisely for any LGBTQI.
There you go.
People in the audience.
That was a very ego-driven, a very personal note.
I feel guilty because I'm sitting here in quarantine in a hotel room and my wife is taking sole responsibility for my son for the next 4 weeks. So I don't really feel like I'm contributing back.
I saw that picture though with you and the microphone and the baby on front. I was like, okay, that's the way to go.
Sometimes you just got to take your son to work. Is it any of the other panelists would like to, I'm really enjoying these closing words. Is it anyone else would like to throw out some final remarks?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, oh, sorry.
Is this a closing round or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I would say that there's still a lot to be done, but I think we came a long way. It's amazing to see how this conversation has evolved along the years, and it's been speeding up. I think. So I would say that I keep my energies high, also high spirits, and trying to encourage everybody to embrace who they are. Actually, our legacy is about how we can encourage people to be themselves and value how wonderful it is when people show up with their own selves and being the best that they can. Specifically, I think for women, I just wanted to share again, don't go alone. We have today created a number of wonderful communities like this one. There's always a community nearby you to support you, to where you can share your experience or you can hear others' experiences. And also, I would say that continue to be ready, because you can find wonderful opportunities along the way. And most of all, feel ready. So everything that we can do to, like, in terms of self-acknowledgement, self-awareness, to feel that we have this this power to take the opportunities and to make the choices that life will bring to us along the way. I think we'll be able to fulfill our expectations, whatever it is. Thank you so much. I loved this morning, learned a lot. I think I'm having a very inspired week after being here with all of you.
I wanted also to thank everyone. I learned a lot today, and I loved that conversation. And I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to thank the audience for the questions, but also the Berlin School of Creative Leadership. I did not mention, but I'm class 11. And I would say that for me in my career, the school has played a great role and guided me. And thanks to the school, I think that I took the road that was exactly right for me. So thank you guys. Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. And continue your great job in supporting, giving advices, and providing great tools for women like us, and also for men, to reach the best of their capacity potential.
Thanks, Zinnia.
Yeah,
go ahead, Tara.
Sorry. I think we've been speaking a lot about, or I have, about creating male man shields and the importance of allyship. And I think one thing just to call out before we close is that massive thank you to David for helping facilitate today. I think, like you, Zinnia, I went through the Berlin School and found a massive ally in David already. He's been fighting the good fight for a number of years and helping shape future creative leaders from all over the world, and is that example of ally. And he has also played an instrumental part and given a lot of his time in the development of Rare. So I think we should just give a massive hand to David for being amazing male man shield before we finish. So again, so thank you, David. I would like to thank everyone for joining us for this discussion from the Berlin School and Rare with Google, to our amazing panelists and to the audience. Few housekeeping things before we close. Please follow Rare_global on Instagram to keep this conversation going. And if you would like to connect with more people like you and with our community, that is a place to do it. And other diverse minds. Please follow the Berlin School for all the academic goodness and learnings the school provides. And in final words, for the females, change is not all on your shoulders. By you being here in the industry, not designed for you, is something. And for any males in the audience, please join us, become a male man shield. Allyship is what will change the state of our industry and drive it forward. So thank you from me. Megan, do you want to close from the school?
You said it. Follow us on social media, follow Berlin School. I mean, you heard some great testimonials from the women here on the panel from our executive MBA in creative leadership. And we have more programs and products coming to you soon. So follow us, and this recording will be in the LinkedIn event. So do share it with all your friends, family, and colleagues who are sleeping right now because it's past midnight. Go ahead, Rosa.
Is this the advertising round? Cool.
Go for it, yes.
Cool. Because in April, I will be chairing the committee at the European Women on Boards, and I'm building a group of people with a communication background to, in this association, work for having more women in leadership positions around Europe. So if anybody in the audience is interested to volunteer 1 or 2 days a month, I'd be happy. I would be really happy. And yeah, just write me a note on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Awesome. On the half hour, look at us go. Time management. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.